Okay, let's go ahead and begin. So, thank you so much for joining us. We are having the Sage 100 period and year-end processing course today, and we're so excited you're here. Welcome to the course. My name is Kimberly Tucker, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at DSD, and I have the privilege of being your event host today, which means I will be here to monitor any questions that you have that you submit through the chat function of this webinar. And just in general, if you have any hiccups with connecting or anything of sorts, go ahead and respond to any of the emails that we've sent you, and we'd be happy to help in any way. With us actually going through the content is our senior consultant on our Sage 100 team, Jim Petrie, and we're so excited, and we have so much to cover today, so this will be brief, but Jim is well versed in this topic, and we're really excited he's here to present. On the far right here, you see the guide that you should have received actually last Friday. So it was holiday Monday for us here at DSD yesterday. So we did send it a few days ahead. And if for some reason you did not receive that via email, it is available in the handout section of this webinar. So navigate over to the kind of navigation, I guess, to download a fresh copy of that. And if that is unclear to you as well, go ahead and respond to any of the emails you've received from marketing, and we'll go ahead and get you a fresh copy. If you can't find anything, marketing@dsdinc.com, and we'll get you what you need. The agenda today should be pretty clear because you signed up and you thought it valuable. So like we said, there's a lot to cover here, housekeeping, reconciliations, year-end steps. There's all of this is in your guide, but there will be a double-edged demo as well as going through the content. So we encourage you to bring up your Sage system and follow along, as well as have the guide handy to kind of get through any steps that you may have questions about as well. So throughout all of this, we will take questions at certain breaks just for relevance. But if for whatever reason you are shy or want to wait till the end, we will have just a full interactive Q&A where you can pose anything to Jim, and he will most likely wave a magic wand and have the answer. So let's get started. Just a reminder, grab the guide. That is really meaningful content and that will hopefully be really helpful when you're not in this course. But as we go through it, feel free to take notes. There's a notes section at the back, and ask questions for sure. As we're saying, ask questions as they arise. The main concept here is interaction. So while it is a webinar environment, I will be monitoring the chat box throughout. So it's definitely, if something pops in your head, just start in the chat and we'll see what we can do. And lastly, don't worry if you get pulled away. This session is being recorded and will be distributed within the next 24 hours for you to view on demand. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So Jim, you ready for us?
I am. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, so I have up a copy of the manual, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jim Petrie. I've been working with Sage I got hired at Sage back in the year 2000. I've been working with the product ever since, and I've been teaching some variation of this class for the last 18 years or so. So a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and just sort of dive right into it. I'm going to skip page 1 here. Table of contents we're going to kind of gloss over, and we'll get right into the meat of things. So what does period end do? There's a couple different kinds of period end. The distinction is super important. The most important of the period ends is the general ledger period end. What the GL period end does in effect is it blocks all of the modules, not just GL, but all of the modules from posting to a closed GL period. So when you've got your financials printed and sent to the bank and the auditors and whatnot, and you're not going to change them anymore, that's the time you want to do your GL period end, and that's the last of the modules you would close. But generically speaking, that's what period end does in Sage. Is it closes the period and it does some housekeeping behind the scenes. The housekeeping that gets done varies by module. We'll talk through the distinctions of the most popular modules, the core ones. We'll focus on GL, AP, and AR. And we'll talk a little bit less, but still about other modules in Sage that relate to those modules. One of the good pieces of news is that Sage, when they went to rewrite the software, they started with what they could call the framework modules. This was about, I don't know, 12 years ago now they started doing this rewrite. And they've made it such that the tasks are all very similar throughout the modules. So once you get to hang one of the modules, the other module is just going to be like old hat because you'll understand it from having done the other modules. So here we go. So first thing I want to mention is the order of the modules. I think the guide has a list, but I like to just look at the Sage menu. And if you look at the menu, sorted the original way, you can't sort by module lists. See, alphabetically, this doesn't work. You have to sort it the way the programmers intended. And in that scenario, what you do is you go up the list to close modules. So custom office, there's nothing to close. eBiz, there's nothing to close. Fixed assets, nothing to close. Nothing to close. There is a period end in here, so you can do period end at MRP first, but conceptually, you move up the list, and then you have your core modules towards the end, AP and AR, followed by GL. One of the concepts I want to mention is you want to close a module that talks to another module. You want to close the module that talks to the other module first. As an example, sales order talks to the accounts receivable module, so you'd want to close sales order before AR. While we're on that topic, I'll just mention that if you have the distribution modules, sales order, purchase order, inventory, you generally want to try to close those three at the same time because they all talk to each other in terms of the receipts and sales and such. So it's a good idea to close those three at the same time before you close AP and AR, and then you close GL last. Usually you trail GL. Most companies I work with, it's like GL is a year behind or a couple months behind. It's not usually closed right away, but some companies do lock it down and then they'll actually reopen it if they have to go back and post something. So we're going to jump right into some of the GL setups and talk about that. Back in here, I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong copy of my manual here. I want to go to this one here. All right, so I'm going to start with the GL setup options and talk through the ones that are important for period end in Sage. I'm going to go ahead and do a half screen here with Sage so we can see the manual while we work. And we're going to go into GL. And I'm going GL to the setup and then GL options. One caveat I'm going to mention, my data is it's demo data that Sage provides. It's a copy of the ABC company, and quite frankly, the postings are sometimes made up and they don't always make sense. So if I go to run a couple of reports today, in my data, they might not tie out, but yours should. So we'll talk through that when we get to that point. I just wanted to mention that this is not real data I'm working with, but obviously your data is going to be real. So the first thing I want to check here is the fiscal period and year up in the main tab, right-hand side. It should be set to whatever the current open period is, and that means you should be able to post to that period or any date in the future. Mine is currently set to 12/2022. Once we close, it should increment to say 1/2023. The years to retain GL history is an important one. I think the minimum you can set it at is 2, but you don't want to set it at 2 because one of those 2 years is the new year that gets created. So generally speaking, the minimum we recommend would be, I think, 8 years, because you might have to go back 7 years for an audit. But generally speaking, the GL data doesn't take up a huge amount of space in Sage. So I would recommend going 20 years, 50 years, 99 years, and just purge it if it gets to be too much. But otherwise, GL data is very, doesn't take up a lot of space in Sage. So that's one where it doesn't hurt to keep a lot of data, more so than you might need. The other settings I want to look at in my setup options on the entry tab here, we have reset journals and registers. So our choices are never reset, period end, or year end. I'm sorry, this is in the manual too. This is on the next page somewhere. I'm sort of going from memory with this. Yeah, it's right here, the never reset. So what we want to do here is set it to never reset. And why do we do never reset? Because you aren't closing the modules, typically speaking, on December 31st. Like you might not close GL until March, right? Once you get your final auditing entries to make or whatever. If you aren't closing GL until March, then when you do your year end in GL, that's when it's going to reset these. You don't want to start with a new set of GJ numbers starting with 1 starting in March, right? You wanted to start them on January 1st and you can't because you're not ready to close GL. So we recommend never reset for both of these. And then Sage just keeps incrementing the number. And then you just, if you have a specific number, you can look it up. You can also look up by dates. So just we recommend never reset there for that reason, because you don't reset your, you don't do period end at that, right at the December, January junction to make those numbers really be meaningful. So that's the other setting I want to talk about in GL options. So also budgets, there's an option here to copy actual to default. What does that mean? It's like, so if you have budgets in Sage, budget's basically a set of numbers, like you might have 3 budgets, maybe like a best case scenario, middle of the road, bad case scenario, have budgets and 3 sets of income and expense numbers and whatnot. Whichever one's marked as the default, if you have this checked, it just means take the actual postings and make that be the budget. So that's a choice you can make. Or I usually would not do that. I would load separate budget numbers, and then when you go to run your budget reports in GL, there's a way to pick the specific prior year's GL actuals to compare against the budget. So you don't have to copy it in as a budget, but that's a choice you can make if you check that box there before you go to do period end. So the actual processing of period end in GL is pretty straightforward. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Remember, again, GL is the last module you would close because it's the one that locks everything else down, and it's the one that all the other modules talk to. But I'm closing it here first because GL is the one module here everybody in the room should have as a module. So everybody's going to have GL. Everybody's going to need to know how this works. So that's why I'm doing GL first. So GL has period end processing right here. Before we get to period end processing, I'll mention period end report selection. What does that do? So if you go to period end processing and you get this choice here for print period end reports, right? If I proceed, I've got a list of reports right here that I can print. I'm just going to drag these over. Sorry, it's on the right screen. Now, what if I don't care to see the GL analysis or the GL detail because it's 100 pages? So the point behind the period end report selection task is that you can edit those reports. So you could say, well, geez, I don't need this analysis report. Let's just get rid of it. And the trial balance, maybe I want to run a particular setting. I've got an export to Excel I like to use maybe, or something like that. You can pick a different setting. You can save it to a specific printer. So there's ways to kind of customize your reports. And frankly, another thing you can do is, let's say you need to run 6 different reports for GL all the time. You have to run them like every day. You could actually put them on this list. You could go to period end. You can go to period end processing, and you can actually start the process. I'm sorry, let me drag the screen over so you can see what I'm talking about. 1 second. Go launch GL period end processing. And I'm going to go ahead and proceed. And I get a warning about allocations. So an allocation is a rule you can set up that divvies up a GL account balance, maybe based on activity or history or some criteria you specify. I don't really plan to cover allocations in detail, just want to talk through what that warning means. It's just a warning to say, hey, you haven't done your allocations yet, so if you're going to do them, you should do them before you close GL. So I'm going to continue period end without the allocations. And I get to this report screen. But the point I was making a minute ago was you can actually, if you need to run reports all the time, you can go here and hit print, and it'll go and print all these reports sort of automatically. And then you don't even have to close period end if you're not ready to, but you can get those copies of those reports all generated. So this is like our GL trial balance. Just save that. And this is, looks like an income statement coming up here next. Sorry, I don't even really save all three of these. And then finally, you get to this screen here. So if and when you're ready to commit to it and change the period, you would say yes, and that's basically the end of the process for the GL. If your goal was to just print some reports, though, you could say no, and then not actually commit to the period end, but still get the reports printed. So that's the power behind that period end report selection task is building reports that you actually want to look at when you go to do your period end task. So I'll go ahead and say no here. I'll say yes, why not? So I'll say yes. And it flashes by. I don't have a lot of history in my GL, so all it really is going to see, you're going to see from a practical standpoint, is that current period now is 1 of 2023. And because I did have this set to year end, so if I go to do a journal entry, it's going to start at 1 again because I had that set to year end, but I normally would want to have set that to never reset. So if I do a new, let's see, JE here, £, yeah, it brings up number 1 again. The downside of having it like that is because it's like you might have a JE number 1 from March of 2017 and from April of 2018 and March of 2019. So you'll have multiple GL JEs, and it's just easier to keep them separate if they have different numbers. So that is most of what I'll talk about for GL. Sorry, I should just cover here. So the retained earnings, what Sage does is it's a calculation it makes. The retained earnings is basically the net of the prior year's income accounts less the net of the prior year's expense accounts. You take up all your income, profit, income minus expenses, i.e. the profit. That's the change in retained earnings that you'll see. But you don't need to run period end in GL in order to see the new year's retained earnings. It should just recalculate. It's a programming thing. You don't have to do period end for the retained earnings account to be correct. Is what I want to say there. The GL is designed to allow an unlimited amount of periods to be open simultaneously. Really, the practical takeaway I think you should make from that is that, yeah, it might be great to be able to post right back into 2017 all without having, to reopen periods or whatever, but do I really want my users to accidentally post something in the wrong year? And the answer is invariably going to be no. So that's why we want to close the module, the GL module specifically, to lock users out from changing the financials. So that's what this is talking through. It allows you the ease to post back to a prior period. Honestly, GL is one of the only modules in Sage that you can reopen very easily. I'll show you how to do that right now. If you are at a point where, let's say you've closed GL and you need to go back, you just got an email from the auditors, the accountant that says, hey, can we book this change to retained earnings or the owner's whatever profit account? Then you can go, if you need to in GL, you can go to GL setup options. Literally, to access this task, you have to have all users out of all tasks in Sage. So nobody's doing cash receipts, nobody's in sales order, nobody's in inventory, nobody's doing anything in Sage. Then you can get to this task if you've got the rights and role maintenance and just toggle the period back to the prior. That will allow you to make the entry in Sage. And then really the best practice would be to do period end again. But in practice, I've seen users just change the period back if they can get back into the setup, and then it locks it again. You want to go through period end at least once, but you can go back in time that way to put something into a prior fiscal period GL-wise if you need to. That's the trick to reopening the GL, is just getting access to the setup options so you can change it back and then change it forward again. So we have some rules here. Why do we close GL every month? So that minimizes the likelihood of going into the wrong period or the wrong year. Now is the month where you're most likely to see somebody posting back into 2022 on accident. So if GL is closed, then that would prevent somebody from posting in 2022 for all the modules entirely. Can you reopen a previous closed period in GL? Yes, you can. My former coworker wrote this. We strongly discourage this part. I'm not sure why we strongly discourage it. if you haven't produced final financials, I don't really see the downside to reopening the GL, but that's the risk would be if somebody's relying on the previously posted numbers and then the change. That's really the argument there about going back and changing it. So that's the note there about going into the period. Sometimes you have to post the prior period though, so it's really not a question of should you or not if you have to. So before you close the GLs, general housekeeping steps, you want to make sure all of the daily transaction registers have been printed and updated. So if you'll notice each module, if I go to, for example, accounts receivable, if I go to main, it's going to have a DTR, daily transaction register. AP has one, inventory has one, sales order has one. You can go to all the modules and run those individually, but frankly, the best way to do it is go to GL. Because if you go to GL, daily transaction register, it's going to query all the modules for you. You don't have to go APAR and all that separately. If you have postings from AP that would show up in here, from AR, et cetera. This is just demo data, so I don't have anything out here, but you might be surprised if you go to run this in your live company right now, you might see an AP entry from last August or something, because specific reasons that I won't get into, but it's a very common thing that happens in Sage where you'll find previously posted stuff that you thought was in GL never got updated. That GL daily transaction register is really the way to go to find that stuff. Okay, and then you want to check to see your subsidiary ledgers against your control accounts. Let's talk about what that means. So your subsidiary ledger for AR is the accounts receivable GL account and the balance that you would produce from the AR report called the AR trial balance. Let me go to AR for a minute, just talk what that means. So in accounts receivable, there's a couple of reports. You'll notice there's an aged invoice report. You'll notice there's an AR trial balance report. Well, what's the difference? The aged invoice report is not designed to tie out to the GL. It might tie to the GL, but it's not designed to. The aged invoice report pulls off of the invoice date or the document date, like your check date. It doesn't post off of the transaction date. So a quick example, you post an April invoice date, and you give it a May posting date for the GL. You go to run your aged invoice report, you're going to see it on the aging as of April 30th, but you won't see it on the GL on April 30th. You won't see it in GL till May. That's why you want to run the trial balance. The AR trial balance is designed to tie against the GL account or the control account. So if I look at my AR trial balance, I'm going to go ahead and bring the screen over here. I want to run it as of the end of the year, and just open in all detail, that's fine. You just want to go ahead and preview basically the default as of the end of the year. And I've got no data in here. This is a terrible example, but imagine that my report says in the balance column that there's $180,000. What I would do then is go to my GL. I'm going to run this for the year 2025 because my demo data's got data in 2025. It'll make for a more meaningful example. So pretend this is 2022. I'm going to do 2025. And now I have an AR trial balance with data in here. In my invoice balance column, this one right here, on the last page, that number right there, that's 694, 457, that should be my AR account balance with a couple of assumptions you have to make, but that should match this number here. So if I go to my AR account in GL, back to GL, I'm in GL, I think, sorry, and then account maintenance. I'm going to do a lookup. I'm going to find my AR account. I like to sort on description. AR is right there. I think that's the one. And I want to go to my whatever year I'm balancing, so 2025, go to the history tab, not this account. It's this one right here, I think. My balance as of whatever date I ran the report as of should match. Now remember I said that there's a couple of assumptions baked into that. So that 548 number, I've got another AR account. The reason is I've got two different AR accounts. If I add that 548 plus that 145, I'll bet that gets the 694 number. So a lot of companies I work with, there's just one AR account you would tie out, but if you've got multiple accounts, then it gets a little more complicated. You would add up all of the GL balances to tie to that number on the AR trial balance. If we were to talk about accounts payable, it's the exact same thing. You go to the accounts payable, you run the AP trial balance, You compare it against your AP control account, and those should match as well. So that's what we talk about in terms of this bullet point right here, subsidiary ledgers supporting control accounts. Okay, recurring journal entries are reviewed. I don't want to go into great detail about recurring entries. If you have them set up and you use them, you already know what you're doing probably. There's general journal, I think is where they're at. Yeah, you can do standard, you can do recurring. Where are they? Yeah, recurring journal entry, sorry, this is a separate task. Recurring journal entry here. See if I have any in here. I have a couple of them set up. Anyway, the idea is that you want to post and run them before you close the period. So I'm not going to get into detail about setting these up and running them, but you would normally go through and run your recurring journals via the recurring journal task here, and that's the update that that's talking about. There's a GL worksheet report you can run. That's this guy here. Go ahead and preview it. Sorry, everything's bringing over on the wrong screen here, and I'm gonna pick 2025 just because it's gonna give me more meaningful data. The Sage data that sent for this version was starting in the year 2025, so that's why it's easier to work with that date. So what this report looks like, it's just got spots where you can put in, like it's just basically like the old T-charts where you can put in your debits and credits and figure out new balances. You can dump this out into Excel if you need to. So that's just what that suggestion is running that report right there. And of course, you want to post any journal entries before you close the period if you can, but if you can't, you can go back and reopen. You want to make sure that your trial balance compares to your CPA's trial balance. That's a very excellent point. If they don't, then there's a problem. You have to go sort that out before you're ready to close. Otherwise, at that point, it's pretty straightforward. We walked through it already with the period end report selections and the allocations and all that stuff. And that's kind of GL in a nutshell. So I'm going to talk through some of the subsidiary modules here in a minute. Just wanted to see if there's other stuff. All right, so yeah, there's other housekeeping stuff you can do. If you're not familiar with housekeeping tools in Sage, we recommend you do a test company so you know what the results of what you're going to do are going to be in the test company. I'll show you how to make a test company right now. I'm in this YE1 company. I'm going to make a YE3 because I already have a YE2. So the way you do that is you go to modules, you go to library master. This is a rights thing. You don't have rights to this, and you'll need to find somebody that has rights in your organization. But in library master main company maintenance is where you can create a new company and basically copy an existing. So I wanted to create a YE3. I'm just going to type YE3 and then give it a description. YE1 copy dated 1/1/17/2023. And then this version of Sage, I have to give it a company type. Choices are live, archive, demo, etc. I'm going to pick archive. If you don't see company type, don't worry. Just have an older version of Sage that you've got. All the company type does is associate some role-based events around it, like you can't delete live companies, for example, that sort of thing. So this is marked as an archive, and then I can click my copy button, and I get a dialog saying, company record must be saved. That's fine. We're going to save that YE3 record. And I get a dialog that says, hey, if you're going to copy one module, make sure you copy the other modules that talk to it. So for example, if you're going to copy sales order, you got to copy AR. Otherwise, sales order is not going to work without a customer list. So that's what that's saying. We're going to OK that. Generally speaking, in this era, hard drive space is pretty short, so you just copy all modules. That's my suggestion. But I'm going to put in my source company here, YE1. To my destination of YE3, and it's going to want to default to all companies and all modules. So my demo data is pretty small, and I'd like to have a full copy, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed, and they'll proceed pretty quickly. I've seen companies, though, that would just copy a specific module, so I'm going to say yes here, all modules. Examples where you might copy just one module might be inventory. Inventory is a really good one because inventory is perpetual. Perpetual means there's no as of date on the reports. You go to run your stock status report, it's always as of this moment in time. So the best way to get your inventory stock status report as of 12/31 is to have a company data set dated, literally copied on 12/31. Because as soon as you start posting January transactions, it changes your stock status report and inventory. So that's one module where it's very helpful to have backup of data. Another really popular one is the payroll module, because for the longest time, payroll wouldn't let you have multiple years open. But as of, I think, payroll or Sage version 2017, 2018 or so, payroll module became modern, and now it's in the framework, and it allows you to have multiple periods and years. And we make payroll backups more as just a nod to the past, really, because in the live payroll, you have the ability to go back to a prior year and process reports and even matrix filings for prior years. So that's, sorry, I got off on a tangent there, but that's the company maintenance copy process, and that allows you to have another set of your company data in case you mess up in a different company. So if I just go here to my company lookup here, I just want to verify and see, yep, that my YE3 data did get created and it exists now. So that's how I would create a backup company. Okay, and then so this manual is talking about here GL Exchange and VI, and so this is talking about importing budgets. If you import budgets, please reach out to us. If you have an import already set up, it's very easy to set up a VI or Visual Integrator import job to import budget data. We really just need a spreadsheet with GL account numbers in the first column, and then going across the page, columns 1 through 12 for each of the fiscal periods that are going to have numbers in them. We can talk about, happy to help with exporting data to start a budget or importing it back into Sage if you need help with that. And I'm just going to mention here, because we've got I have a page we talk about with this delete accounts utility. So very dangerous tool. I'll mention why. That's under GL. So I'm going to go back to General Ledger. I'm going to go to utilities, and then delete accounts or change accounts. Really, they both have the same thing to watch out for. I'm going to pick on change accounts here. So change accounts would be where you would go to say, I want to merge a particular account. You can do segments, but I recommend doing whole accounts. This is going to ask for a specific full account number. Watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say I want to merge my inventory east of warehouse, and I want to merge it into my inventory west warehouse. And I want those two accounts to both become inventory west. So if you see what I did here, the -01 account and the -02 account are going to get merged together into the -02 account. And that's something a normal user would probably want to do in Sage. That's a normal thing you want to do, but I would make it make a backup company first before you do this sort of process, because it's not easily reversed. The backup is really the reversal in case this does something badly. And where things can go badly is if you don't put in either the same account or an adjacent account. If I were to say, if I pick on all the way down here, what would happen is every account between 115 and 118 would get merged into one. And I've taken support calls in the past where people have gone in and done something like this, where they say, I want that account and that account to merge into that account. And what it'll do is it'll grab all of the GL postings from all those accounts, and that's a disaster. Nobody wants to do that. So that's the danger behind these tools, is just that if you give it a clear set of instructions and it allows you to do it, it'll actually merge a million accounts together, and you probably don't want that to happen. So very dangerous tools. I would really recommend you reach out to somebody at DSD. If you've never worked with them before, I would strongly recommend you reach out. If you have worked with them before, at a minimum, make a backup company code before you start doing that stuff. So that way you've got something to restore from in case things happen to go horribly wrong. The other thing can happen is it'll go to merge stuff, and then maybe you get some weird error message and you're stuck in the middle of a merge and you want to just wave a magic wand and go back to how things were before. That's what that backup company is for. So, okay, enough about deleting and changing accounts. And recalculating account balances. Yeah, I don't recommend you do that on your own. That can cause issues if you don't know what you're doing. But that will sometimes fix issues as well. Basically, long story short, there's a one file in Sage that stores all the detail, and another file that stores account summaries by account number and month. This utility just recalculates the summary file based on the detail file. That's all it's doing. But there's different reasons why you might not want to do that. So please talk to somebody at DSD before you do that, because it might throw things out of balance, actually. And yeah, purge GL history, we would recommend you don't go in and do that, because the GL history, it's pretty compact and quick, and GL will look at the setup option we have up down here for a number of years to retain. And as you're doing year ends in GL, it will purge once you hit that threshold. So if the number is too high, you really only want 10 years, just set it to 10 there and let Sage do the rest. But there is, in fact, a utility if you wanted to purge the GL history for some reason, you go back and get rid of old history. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a minute, see if we've got any questions before we move on to some of the subsidiary core modules.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it seems like you're being thorough and clear, so we have not received any questions yet, but
Excellent.
Just want to encourage our audience, go ahead and use that, and we have breaks just like this every, let's call it 20 minutes or so.
Good deal. All right, I'll proceed on then. So next thing I'm going to talk about is accounts. Let's see, I think it's accounts receivable. I'm going to try to follow the manual. It's not jumping around so much. Let me just read through the manual for a couple pages here. So the system date, let's talk about the system date for a minute. So in your Sage launcher, you've got a date down here. My GL system date is 12/31/2022. I close Sage and I relaunch Sage. Give this a second while I log back in. The 2022 version of Sage, by the way. And I go to GL. The first thing that happens is I'm prompted for my accounting date. It defaults to my computer date. So my computer date 1/17 wants to become my system date. What does that mean? That date becomes your default date for tasks you want to do today. So if you're doing stuff for 2022 in GL, you want to put in the 12/31/2022 date. You don't have to, but it's advised, and here's why. It's like if you go to do a general journal entry or any sort of task in GL, really, it's going to default that date in for your date. So go to, general journal entry as an example. And let's just do a new, whatever, like a new GL, maybe, pound sign. Well, that's interesting. Where did that date come in as 1/31/2023? Well, that's weird. That should have come in at 12/31/2022. That's the whole point of setting that date. I wonder if that's an existing entry. Hang on. Let me try that again. Journal entry. Let's make sure. Yeah, I did happen to pick an existing entry. That was my mistake. Hang on. Let me do a new entry. Like I'm going to do a new JE right here. And then hit the pound sign. Sorry. This is an existing entry. I think it's supposed to default in. It's kind of embarrassing. It's supposed to bring in the new date. Oh, why is it not doing that? Hang on. It's weird. I don't want to get stuck on this. But the point of the system date is that it's supposed to make the module dates default in. Clearly, I'm having issues with that this morning or this afternoon, depending on your time zone. Try just a different journal and see. Yeah, I'll have to circle back and figure out something's not working the way it's supposed to with that, and I don't want to get the class bogged down on that. So it's supposed to put in 12/31/2022 as your date there. Apologies that it's not. Okay. So this is talking about the AP aging versus the trial balance and how I want to run the trial balance. And I mentioned how if you post an invoice with a April date and a May posting date, well, it's going to be on the one report, not the other. Yeah, so if you're doing batches in Sage, if you're not doing batches, let's talk about that for a minute. So AR setup, one of the tabs here, entry, I think, has batches. So mine has batches enabled. And I'm going to talk about the advantages about batches. If you've got multiple users, batches are pretty much almost a requirement. But the batches allow you, for example, in invoicing, If I go to invoicing, I get the screen that comes up and asks me for a batch number. I don't have any batches on file, but I can create one. And I'm going to call this Jim's December invoices. Now, the idea behind this is you can create this batch. You can go ahead and put in your December invoices, right? I'm not going to actually put in invoices in there, but the concept is you have a December batch, and then maybe you have another batch with January invoices. The reason you do that is because when you go to post, you get to pick a batch to post, and then everything in that batch is going to post using a single transaction date that you specify. So don't put stuff in different months in the same batch. That's what this sentence is all about, and that's why we recommend using batches, is that you can segregate entries by month so that stuff doesn't hit the wrong fiscal period. That's kind of the idea behind batches there. And then, yeah, if your GL control account agrees the subsidiary for one day and it doesn't for a different date, that's the date issue for sure. So example there, you're running your, it's the month of May, you're running your AR aging or your trial balance report, and it's off against the GL. You call me and you say, hey, Jim, my AR trial doesn't match my AR GL. We're in the month of May, what do I do? I'd say, let's try running it as the month of December. Go ahead and push it out as far into the future as we can. And if it's correct in the future, but it's not right now, then that's a timing issue. That's something where something's got the wrong date, and it'll fix itself if you wait. Otherwise, we could figure out how to track it down and go fix it the hard way. But that's a timing issue if stuff ties in one period and does not tie in a different period. Okay. Yeah, and then there's different ways to find the out of balances. I could probably teach a whole class about that, but just reach out to somebody at DSD if you have out of balances. We'll help you sort through that and figure it out pretty easily, I would hope. Okay, and then yeah, if there's a date issue, there's ways to fix it. Generally speaking, without getting the specifics of any particular scenario, it's better to try to fix it in the subsidiary ledger where possible. That's not always possible, so sometimes it's a GL fix, but it really depends on what happened in terms of what you want to fix. But there are different methods of fixing. So the common ones here, adjusting them in the subsidiary ledger to fix a date issue, doing reversing JE, to take the GL out of the wrong period, maybe book it to the right period, or wait sometimes if it's a timing issue. So other things we can do, I've been contracted to sort through customers' data files and find stuff that's in the wrong year and go fix it manually. It's a real pain, but it's doable. To edit data files, it's not the recommended way to do it, but there's lots of ways to fix issues with the data in Sage. So, okay, you don't want to try to change the period in Sage. This sentence was written back when Sage was in the pre-framework days. In the olden days, in AP and AR and all the modules, really, there were just two buckets. You had current and you had future. So here's the deal. It's like if you didn't close your period all the time in Sage and keep up with it and close the next period before another one started, what would happen is that one future bucket would get multiple months transactions in there. So if a company went and they closed a module like AR in April, they didn't close it again until August, their period to date, once they did close, would be super overstated because they would have April, May, June, July in the August bucket. But the good news is that it's the kind of thing that fixed itself because there was only two buckets and everything goes a year to date anyway. So it's the kind of thing where I'm just trying to explain why you're not supposed to set those periods, because some of the modules would get really messed up by that. But the modern Sage, the way the modules are written these days, everything gets bucketed, and I use that bucket term as a verb to mean where it gets put in the data files based on the transaction date. So Sage has gotten a lot better about the bucketing of data and having accurate buckets. So I'm going to talk about subsidiary modules. You can do current and one future period. You don't want to get multiple future periods ahead, and that really is a nod to that two bucket thing I was talking about. You can cause issues if you don't keep up with period end. I've seen companies that don't close, AR all year, and it works, but it's frankly better if you keep it up to date. Examples of why would be if I go to, just give you an example here. I'm going to try inventory report. I'm sorry, we're jumping around modules here, but inventory report's one I know that I think is a good example. If I go to the trial balance in inventory, that date right there populates based on the inventory period. So my inventory is in 12 of 2022, which means the reports are all pointing at the right date my end user would want to run the report for. If, for example, I didn't close inventory for 3 years and this was 12 of 2018, like if I go in inventory, setup, options, let's pretend this was set 2021, right? And I go to run that same inventory report, trial balance. See the date, the user's got to go in and change and remember to change it. Maybe they don't always remember. So that's another reason why you want to keep period date up to date, is because it, wherever there's a date default, it's oftentimes reading from the module defaults. So close your eyes while I change the date back here. You don't want to watch me do this. You're not supposed to do that. But okay, so inventory is back to 12 of 2022. So yeah, just general rule of thumb though, this is just meant to keep it in the habit. So that means trying to do it on a monthly basis, and that way it's just habit, and it's just something you check off as part of the month-end processing. So there's a bunch of reports you can tie out. I showed you the control accounts like the AR trial and the AP trial. You can also do sales tax. You can do inventory reports. There's bank rec. There's purchase clearing you can do. There's deposits you might be taking in sales order. There's a report for that. Work in process potentially if you're doing job cost or work order modules. So you don't have the time to obviously show different reports and all the reconciliation processes behind those, but those are different tasks you might be doing as part of your period end before committing to the period end, i.e. for the period processing. It's just you want to make sure that to the best of your ability that those things are tied out and any discrepancies are addressed and reconciled where possible. Okay, so yeah, regularly inspect your subsidiary ledger reports to tie to the GL. Don't just do it at period end, because if you catch something early, it's more easily fixed. I'll give you a quick example. Customer calls up and says, hey, we did this inventory receipt and we realized we did the wrong unit of measure, and it came in by, the unit cost was off by a factor of 1,000, right? Well, geez, that's a big mess. The problem is they didn't catch it until weeks later. So the receipted item had been sold and it had a wrong unit cost, and it messed up their financials. And it was a big problem to kind of sort out. But had they caught it sooner, then they wouldn't have sold the item at the wrong unit cost. It could have just gone in and adjusted it back out. So that's just another reason why you want to try to tie these off periodically, or at least keep an eyeball on it and make sure you conceptually that your AP ties to the APGL account and that the AR ties to the ARGL account. Okay, and then generally speaking, across the modules, where the modules ability to remove data might have been in the past, it got moved to the utilities menu, and that just made the setting of security in Sage a lot easier. Used to be a report in AR you could actually run, and then the actual report itself would just say, do you want to purge the data? And that was it. It's like any user can run the report and purge it. It was terrible. But that's why they moved the stuff to the utilities menu. So as an example, different modules have different utilities. But if we go to AR, just to kind of look through, so delete and change customers, just like the GL account tool that lets you delete and change GL accounts, but this lets you merge customer numbers together, works exactly the same. Global customer field change is a nice one. It lets you, without using Visual Integrator, change a specific value. So if you said, hey, Jim, we want to change all the customers in this customer range, give them a new salesperson. Well, there's a way to select customers, and there's a way to apply a specific change from and change to. So that is possible to do with that utility. I'm not going to go through all these utilities, but there are different ways to recalculate and remove data. I'm going to start to move ahead for time reasons here. So let's get to AR setup, options, things that check here, your period and year up here in the corner. Let's see what else we got on here. Yeah, 1 second. Sorry, open item. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I talked about open item here, and the years or months or days to retain. So this is a setting. This is my demo data. It should always be set to open item. I don't work with any customers that want mixed or balanced forward. Balanced forward's like a credit card statement. It's like if you charge $1,000 on your Chase card one month, you get the statement in the mail, you see like 18 different things you charge that after $1,000. If you don't pay that bill the next month, what do you get? You get a bill that says you got a bill for $1,000. It doesn't show you the detail anymore, right? Balance forward, when you do period end, it would merge a balance forward marked customer. It gets rid of all the detailed transactions and leaves you with one. Here's your net balance going forward. So not a good way to do accounting. So anyway, you want to make sure that's always set to open item. It should be open item. And then your version of Sage will have a days or months to retain paid invoices. This is an important one. This controls a couple of things. So this month's retained paid invoices, basically 90 days right there, 3 months. I'll show you what that does here. If I go to AR to a customer, click on ABF, the first one up on the list, I think. All right, some memos on the other screen. Go to the invoices tab, all of this data in here, all of these invoices, if they have a zero balance, like this one right here, and we're past that number of months, then that invoice would get purged. This invoice would never go away because it has a balance. That invoice would never go away because it has a balance. But the $0 ones, once they reach that cutoff, they go away off of the invoices tab, off of the transactions tab, and guess what? They also go away off of your AR aged invoice report and off of your AR trial balance report. So if you want to see those transactions and be able to run your report for prior periods, you probably need to increase that setting. And again, that setting, AR setup options, additional tab. You could actually label this, how far back do you want to be able to run your AR aging? So if you want to be able to run it for 12 months going backwards, set that to 12 months. It's going to cause your AR invoices tab for your customers to keep invoices for 12 months, but that's the only way to run your AR aging going back 12 months. As soon as you run your AR period end, if that data gets purged out of there, then it won't show up on the aging anymore. So that's FYI. And the same exact concept over in AP. There's a months to retain paid invoices, and it does the exact same thing with the vendors and the invoices tab and the AP trial balance and AP aged invoice report. So just be aware of that. And then there's a setting here for removing period paid invoices during period or year end. If you're doing period ends and you just want to have invoices removed at year end, that's why you would set that there. Otherwise, it would remove them every month based on that setting of months to retain. Usually, it's better to set that months to retain higher, and then if it's too much data, then you can trim it down by lowering it and doing another period end until you're happy with how far back you can go. But if you cannot get AR aging data, that's likely the reason why, is that setting was set too low and period end was done. Moving on, so that talks about these buckets in here. Like I talked about earlier, the rewrite of Sage means that we're not really constrained to the 2-bucket system anymore, and everything gets bucketed based on a transaction date. So you can test that yourself. If you go and you post an AR invoice to a future period, you'll notice at the customer level that it'll have it in that future period on the summary and history tab. I don't have the time to go through that right now, but it will bucket it based on the transaction date. So general housekeeping steps for AR. Make sure everything in sales order and AR is posted. No open cash receipts for the month, no unposted invoices. If you're doing finance charges, I would suggest you stop doing finance charges because nobody pays them, but maybe you do finance charges and they are getting paid, then you do your normal finance charge processing. I don't want to go through that process, but that would be another step if you're doing finance charges. If you're doing statements, you want to print those out. Hopefully you've got them set to go to paperless and you can have them get emailed out. That would be another step to do before your period end. Final transactions and adjustments. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's a couple things maybe you can clean up. If you have a customer that has like a plus balance invoice and a minus balance invoice, you can do a $0 cash receipt, apply the plus versus the minus. You can do the same thing over in AP with a manual check. You start off a manual check entry with the letters APP and a number like APP1, APP2. That creates a sort of a secret $0 manual check that lets you apply a plus and a minus balance for a vendor against themselves to make them go away. So there's ways to do housekeeping. I think the manual talks about that a little further down. But that's just kind of what we're talking about in terms of final transactions and adjustments. If you're doing commissions, maybe you've got commissions linked to other modules in Sage. You have commissions set up to talk to, I believe, payroll, accounts payable, or GL. Then you would need to run that commissions report to make those push out to the other module before you close. I do not recommend doing apply credits to open invoices. I think that's a disaster area. There's a utility, apply credits to debits. I don't want to share where it's at because what it does is it takes all the transactions by date, all the oldest stuff. It doesn't care about the amounts. It doesn't do any sort of smart or intelligent matching. It just grabs the oldest stuff and mushes it all together. And invariably, a customer will call and say, "Hey, I ran it out credits to open invoices. How do I reverse it?" That's a real popular support call. So if you're going to do a cash or apply an application for a customer, I would recommend going in and doing a $0 cash receipt. $0 cash receipt has no financial impact because it's literally $0. It's just debiting and crediting AR. It allows you to apply a plus versus a minus. And again, I don't recommend doing the auto apply for anything with Sage. It's not well written. It's not smart. It will apply just poorly, and you'll be unhappy with the results. So I would go in and do the applications manually. And then when you're ready, it's just like in the GL. We're going to go to period end processing. Remember, we've got the period end report selection allows us to edit the list of reports. So if I proceed here, a lot of reports on here. I probably don't want to print 15 reports, but I could edit it down to maybe the 4 or 5 that I found useful. Maybe you've got report settings that you rely on, so you can program that all in. I'm going to actually uncheck because I don't really want to print all this stuff. It'll take too long. You get the, do I want to change period 12 to period 1 of the following month? And they'll say yes. And it flashes by really quick because I've got no data in my demo data. But yours might take 30 seconds to a minute maybe while it goes through and does its housekeeping. That's the AR module in a nutshell. You'll notice that as we proceed, the amount of information is going to start to repeat because the processes are very similar, but we're going to talk about AP next here. I'll pause for a minute just to see, do we have any more questions come up recently or no?
Perfect. Yeah, we did have a few come through. So one asks, what happens if we already closed all of the modules out for 2022, but now our CPA needs us to do journal entries for 2022?
No problem. Okay. So journal entry is something you're going to put in general ledger. So what we can do for GL, and really only for GL, I wouldn't want you to do this for other modules, but you can go to GL, to the setup. The setup requires getting everybody out of all tasks. So everybody's got to be out of everything to do with AR and sales order and AP and all the other modules. If you can get this task open, you can go and change the period back to the prior. So as an example, let me say it's in one of 2023 right now. If I go to GL and I try to do a general journal entry, and I'm going to put in a 12/22 date, just pick on one of these existing ones, or maybe, sorry, just grab one. I'm going to put in 12/31/2022. I just get a hard stop. You cannot do that. So it won't let me put in the date at all. So to prove that you can, we're going to go now, setup, GL options, toggle that back to 12/2022, accept, back to GL main journal entry. And let's do GL here. Oops, sorry, wrong column there. Column sign there. Fix. There we go. And then now it both defaults in my date because that was my system date, and it allows the date to be entered and posted. So you would type in your entry, you would print it out, you go ahead and update. And then when you're done, I would recommend you do period end again for GL. But honestly, I've seen where customers have gotten away with it. If they've already done period end, you can actually just toggle this back. If you're just like doing this late at night, you're the only person in the system, just bam, you're done. That's it. Other questions?
Yes, and a couple more. Another is more of a statement. I just wanted to bring it to you. The attendee said, I'm at the case where today's date will populate in the middle of entering an entry for the prior month. Do you have any thoughts on why that would happen?
Kind of like what was happening to me a little bit ago, maybe with the dates. It looks like my task is behaving better now. If I go to the try transaction journal entry. And I just go to initiate a transaction here. Like I'm going to do, I don't know, GL, sign. So it looks like I'm getting the wrong date again, because that date is not my system date. Is that the question? I'm wondering. I'm not 100% sure why this is happening for me right now, but conceptually, that's what should happen is when I go to create a new entry, maybe I'm in the wrong. GL is not my forte. Let me go to AR for a minute, just try it in AR. So I'm going to pick a date, just an odd date. We're going to do the 4th of July. We're going to say 7/4/2022, right? So this is July of 2022. Now, if I go to do a invoice data entry, we'll create a new batch, go to create a new invoice. See, my date comes in as 7/4/2022. That's the idea behind that system date is new transactions that you create should inherit the system date.
Gotcha.
I'm not 100% sure why my GL entries weren't getting the date like from the system date, but I think it has to do with the fact that they were already created and in history somehow. Like I've got keep deleted entries turned on in my setup, which means that I created those entries in the past, and that's why they're coming up with the wrong date. That's my theory, at least. I'm happy to dive in with somebody if they're having trouble with system dates and talk through it more. But conceptually, the system date for the module just populates the reports and data entry tasks. Other questions?
Okay, yep. Another states you closed the period, so it went from 1/2023, or sorry, it went to 1/2023. I would think that it wouldn't allow you to post to 2022 unless you reopen that period, correct?
The GL's setup is the one that controls everything. So if you go to, watch this, if I go to AR invoice register or sales journal, and I pick a batch here, I've got a batch, there's nothing really in the batch, it doesn't matter. I want to get to this screen right here and show you accounts receivable posting date. Look at my warning. The accounts receivable posting date falls into a prior GL period. So all the subsidiary modules look at the GL period to figure out whether they can close. If you close AR for the month of May, you can still go and create a May cash receipt because it's looking to see if the GL is closed or not. I know it's kind of a weird thing about the period end in Sage, but the GL is the period end that everything looks at to figure out whether or not it can close prior.
Okay, great. A couple other questions. The next one asks, can I close AP and AR modules without closing the GL modules so we can still make journal entries? For example, we can't close our year end usually months after, but can I still close the AR and AP modules while we wait?
Yes, that's what a lot of companies do. So yeah, you can close your AP and AR, let's say a couple of weeks into the new month or year. You know, you've got your processing, your month end you're going through, but close that as soon as you can, and then close GL later, you know, months later, if need be, a year later, if need be. That's what we call just trailing the GL, but a lot of companies do it that way, yes. It allows them to make GL entries to clean things up after the fact.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay, last one. Our fiscal year was originally set up incorrectly, 1 year ahead. For example, our fiscal year is listed as 2024, but our postings apply to 2023. Is this hard to change?
So I've helped customers with this, and long and short of it is it's usually a couple, 3, maybe 4-hour project, depending on how much data and whatnot, but you have to go in the data files and redefine the fiscal periods. So you basically, it's doable to fix. It's not an end user can fix themselves very easily kind of thing, but we would make a copy of the company code. And then in the either live company or the copy, one of the two, we would go in the data files and edit it and say that basically the fiscal year 2023, we would change the starting and ending dates so that it redefines all of the dates, and you have to do that through the data files. But it is possible to redefine the fiscal buckets, yes, and then it'll look at in the redefined fiscal year, it'll have the GL come out the way you expect it to with the entries in the right fiscal periods, yes.
Okay. Sounds like Yeah, a
back
worthy
on track.
endeavor. Yeah, that's all the
Yeah,
questions we have now.
yeah, I'd recommend reach out to somebody at DSD. I've helped with that several times in my career. Be happy to help with that if it's something you need to rebucket your financials. I've done that several times, so got a routine for it. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. We're back in the GL stuff in the manual here. I'm sorry, I went up. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong copy. That's why I didn't mean to have that copy open. So, all right, accounts payable. Same general thing. I'll just show you real quick. The setup options has the same setup for there's our fiscal period and year. There's also a year for the 1099 processing. That's stored separately because 1099 is always done on a year basis, and maybe your fiscal, year end is different than the year, but calendar year, 1099s are calendar year, so that's why that's a separate setting. And it's a process we teach a whole separate class about 1099, so I'm not going to go into detail about it, but the assumption here is you've done your 1099s before you do your AP period end, although in theory you could close AP and still do 1099s for the prior year, because when you go into the Atrix filing, one of the first things that comes up is like what year, and you can actually change the year right there. So I'm going to be clear, the Atrix filing, the 1099s can be done either before or after you do your accounting your accounting close for the AP module. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. And then the other thing we talked about with that months to retain invoices, you either have months or days in your version of Sage. Same concept. It's going to apply to populating stuff on the vendors invoices tab, the vendors transactions tab, your AP trial balance, your AP aged invoice report, all populated based on that setting. So bigger is better if you want to be able to run reports for prior periods and prior years. And you can tell Sage to get rid of the AP paid invoices at period or year end right there. Those are really the main settings. And there's also years to retain. So this 1099 payment history, this vendor history, very small amount of data. I honestly, when I set up new systems in Sage, I set that to 99 years. Nobody ever complains because it doesn't take up any data at all, hardly. That's not the transaction detail. That's something different. If you want to talk about transaction detail for AP, there's this AP history, purge AP invoice history. I wouldn't recommend you do this on your own, but this is the task you would go to if you had, let's say, 15 years worth of AP check history and you only need to go back 5. You can get rid of 10 years of history right here and make your reports probably run 65, 70% quicker, depending on how far back they have to go, because Crystal reports will go through and crawl through all the transactions and figure out, like if you run a report for 2022, it's going to look at the stuff from whatever year, like 2005, 2006, 2007, was that in 2022? Is that 2022? And it goes through all those records. That's why Crystal reports are so slow. Sorry, the side rant there. Back to our manual. Not a fan of AP and AR clearing. What that allows you to do is you can set up a customer as a vendor. So for example, like you do business with, I don't know, some local vendor, and they provide a service to you and you provide a service to them, and you invoice each other, but you really pay each other in services. There's a way to match an AP vendor to an AR customer. That's what AP from AR clearing is. It basically, you create a relationship between the AP vendor and the AR customer in the setup options, and then there's a report you can run that'll transfer AP balances over to AR or vice versa. I believe is how that works. Not going to go into that in great detail, but that's another thing you want to do before you do your AP period end. So if you're doing 1099s, I'm just going to mention that Sage has an IRD or year-end install for the 1099s. Long and short of it is if you're on the 2020 version of Sage or higher, then it should be installable. If you're on an older version of Sage, let's say 2019, 2018 version of Sage, the changes made for this year's 1099s were largely focused around some of the exotic boxes on the 1099 miscellaneous form. But a number of customers that have filed 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC filings without the IRD install, and it just works. So advice there, if you can't get the IRD installed, you need to run 1099s, give it a shot, look extra carefully at the data that's getting pulled into Atrix and reach out to us if anything looks off. But we've had a number of customers that have gotten it to file just fine without the IRD. So, and that's just high level talking about the years retained 1099 history and the 1099 processing. Not going to get into the great detail because we taught a whole separate class about that. But if you have questions around 1099, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to try to answer those if you have them. So AP from AR clearing, yeah, we don't want to go into great detail because I'm going to run out of time, but I'm going to just show you the AP period end. It's very similar to the AR period end. It's got the same exact print reports checkbox. It's got the same period end report selection that you can do. So you can edit your list of reports. I'm not going to actually print anything. I'll just go ahead and proceed from there. And you get the same dialog. Do I want to change 12 into 1 of the next year? And say yes. And when you go, if you want to check over in AP setup options after that, that should now say 1 of 2023. All right. Same exact stuff we talked about with the accounts receivable, and make sure your subsidiary ties to the GL. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing purges all that often. I would at least talk to somebody at DSD if you've never done the purges before, so we can talk about why you're doing them and what would make sense and some general good practices. But definitely start before you purge by making a backup company code, because you want to back up with that data in case things go horribly wrong. Okay, I'm going to talk about bank rec for a minute here. Bank rec doesn't really have a period end per se. Bank rec is just bank rec. So if you've done November bank rec, and this is the year end for bank rec, it's December. Well, guess what? That's just December bank rec. It's nothing special. It's just another month's bank rec that you do. So the same general processes apply, where you go into reconcile bank. You call up your bank code. This one's out of balance by 0, so I'm going to use this as an example here. But normally you'd put in an entrance, an ending balance. Let's just say mine is 1040.50, and I'm going to clear something. Oops, I cleared the wrong way. I'm going to clear that one. When you get your out of balance to 0, then you can print your register. We'll save that. Your bank rec report. The way you do it, you put in your bank code, you put in your ending date, and you go ahead and print or preview that. And if you're out of balance by 0, like that, you close that out, you should get a prompt. And I didn't, because I don't have my right set up properly. Maybe you have to print it. But that's what you do for bank rec. And if you've done bank rec, that's the same task you do every month for bank rec. So you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But you get to that point where it says, do you want to remove clear documents? That's the way you get to that prompt. And then it's just, it purges the clear documents out of bank rec. And that's all it's doing. It's just keeping an open ledger of what's cleared and recently cleared. I've had a couple of companies that have tried to use bank rec as like a historical look back. At a company that it's a beer distributor in the East Coast, and a bunch of companies in Sage, and they put in a lot of AP transactions for all these beer vendors, like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of checks per month, multiple people doing AP. And their bank rec, it's like millions of records, and they go to bank rec and they go to call up the bank code, and it takes like 20, 30 minutes just to load the screen. So bank rec is not designed to be permanent storage. It's designed to just be a working list of what's still yet to clear. So just a note there about that. So there's a little bit more details in there about balancing bank rec, and your bank rec may not tie to the cash account in GL, and there's reasons for that. You've got questions about bank rec, we're happy to dive into your specifics. It's hard to talk about bank rec in generalities because everybody's situation is different. So general concepts do apply though. Do one bank account at a time, print it in detail, get the starting date blank, just like that, and then you should get your prompt to clear. Okay, gonna move on because we're running low on time here. So other modules, inventory, sales order, purchase order, these would be modules you would technically close before AP or AR, because remember we're moving up the module list, but modules that you would close in the same general time frame, if you can, are going to be the distribution modules to IMSO and PO all at the same time. Let me go back to the manual here and see what we're talking about specifically. So generally, this is talking about inventory is perpetual, meaning it doesn't have an as of cutoff date. So that's why if you want a snapshot of a report on 12/31, like your inventory stock status report, either in paperless office, go set it up to print to paperless office, you've got a PDF of it, or make a backup company so you can go back and run the reports out of backup company, because once you posted January transactions, then I'm going to close this wrong thing. Then what happens is your inventory stock status, you can't go back and run it as of 12/31. So that's really what that's talking about there. Generically speaking, the tasks for the module are very similar to AR and AP. So if I go, just real quick, I'll talk about the stuff in AP in inventory setup. So module date here in the main tab, upper right hand corner, just like in AR and AP. There's not much in here that relates to year end though. In fact, there's no history or retention in inventory setup. So there's nothing to worry about in terms of changing any options. So you can just do inventory period end when you're ready. Don't do inventory period end until you've made all your inventory transactions for the month, because you can't, even though you could theoretically go back and post into a prior period if you haven't closed the GL yet. If you close the inventory period, then what's going to happen is if you try to put a transaction back into a prior period, it's not going to be in the right buckets on the reports, if that makes sense. So it's better to try to put everything in before you close the module, just for all the modules really. So, and then sales order, just talk about the setup options and sales order and purchase order real quick. Sorry, gotta switch modules. Okay. Sales order also has period and year end up there in the corner. There is some history up here, years to retain sales history and last purchase history. Yes, no, or invoice. A lot of customers like that last purchase history. It's a good setting to have turned on. This sales history, believe it or not, is not all that deep. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space, so I would recommend to put that around maybe 10 years or so, and that way you get the ability to go back and look at reports for prior years pretty easily. Then you go in your period end for sales order. Not much to it, just the same period and report selections, but you can go ahead and proceed here and you get the same date prompt, and that's sales order. And then same deal with purchase order, it's real easy to close. I'm gonna go ahead and just put my prior month in there. Look at the setup options here. Purchase order setup. Current period is 12/2022. Days to retain completed POs. Okay, so that's one that's pretty important. If you've got your purchase order completed, meaning all the quantity received equals quantity invoiced equals quantity ordered, then purchase order should go to complete status. And if you do period end, it's going to look at that setting to say, should I purge the PO and just get rid of it? So it'll stay in the open file in a completed status, like if you say for 90 days here, for 3 months until you do your period end. That's why that purchase order stays out there. But it's helpful to keep the PO out there because maybe you need to do a return of goods. Well, if you want to do a return of goods, having the PO still out there in the open file makes it easy, so it'll call the line back up for you, so you can recall the lines without having to retype everything. So it's helpful to have your POs retained for a little while, but not for the end of time. Usually 90 days is a pretty good compromise. There's a history tab over here as well with the years to retain purchase history by item and vendor. Again, I would set that around, so let's say 10 years if you can. It shouldn't take up a whole lot of history, but that's just like the bucketed stuff. If you go to drill into a specific item where you can see the columns for what vendors received it or received from what vendors and stuff like that. So that's your history settings in PO right there. And then the processing, just like we saw in sales order, saw pretty minimal. Well, I shouldn't say that. So there's purchase clearing, right? Purchase clearing, everybody's purchase clearing account ties out perfectly to the GL, right? We don't have to talk about that at all. Just that's a joke. So yeah, purchase clearing is a bugaboo in Sage. If your purchase clearing is off, I don't have time to get into it in this training session, but I'm happy to talk with you in detail. I do a lot of purchase clearing cleanup with folks. And generally you want to try to get it to the side of the GL, and there's usually a lot of stuff in PO that's out there that's outdated you want to get rid of, and there's various options for getting rid of it. So reach out if you've got that problem. I'm happy to talk through it. But when you've got your stuff cleared out, then you go to purchase order, period, and processing. Same dialog boxes, sales order, inventory, where you can print your reports. I'm going to skip that. And you get the same, do you want to change 12 into one in the next? And I say yes. And that closes purchase order. So some of the modules are fairly easy to close. I don't really have time to get into payroll. That's its whole other process because of the 941s and W-2s and all that. So we have a whole separate class about that. But generally, somebody's on top of payroll, which is closed quarterly, not monthly anyway. So, and then to kind of talk through the order, we have this list here. Somebody went and they looked at the Sage module list and they typed it out in reverse order. You can just look at your Sage module list and go up the list, or you can refer to this list and go down the list. That's a general list of the order you want to close stuff in because certain modules feed into other modules. Okay, and then just generally speaking, we're talking about, subsidiary should tie to controls. That's going to be true of all the modules. You're going to have different reports you can run, but you cannot run, this is another one. So inventory and purchase order, purchase clearing, that's another one. You don't have an as-of date. So if you want to run them as a specific period in time, my recommendation would be, if you want to run, let's say, purchase clearing report, go to run your purchase clearing report. And if you've got it set up to go to paperless, I don't have paperless, so turned on here, apologies there. If you have paperless turned on for reports, just print it as a PDF, and that way it's in your paperless report viewer, and you can go call it up later. That's the easiest way to have it as of a specific date. The other way would be, again, making the backup company code. But there are certain reports, those are the three probably key ones. Inventory stock status report is another one that they don't have an as-of date. So that's another reason why you want to run those before you close your period. Yeah, if you've got your own period end process, you can document it. Maybe you've got specific steps or a spreadsheet you refer to. You can make, it's helpful to have a documentation in place so that way it's just easier to follow month to month and make sure you don't miss anything. And then you can also make spot and favorites. What does that mean? That just means here in Sage, like you can build a list of favorites. Like you can right click and you can insert a folder or a shortcut. You can put in a separator. You can say like period end. And then I can go in here and I can right click and I can say insert a task, or actually, I think all I do is I go to, there's a way to get the task onto the add to favorites right there. So click that. And then I can take it and drag it. And oops, hang on, I did it the wrong way. I want to take that task and drag it, and I can drop it into, I thought I could move it. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical issues here. Trying to right click. Oh, I promise there's a way to organize this. I was not prepared to do the editing of the favorites menu on this call. I apologize. There is a way to make this look a lot prettier. I'm not the expert of that, as you can clearly see. But that's what they refer to by that, make a spot in the favorites. And then just, wherever you can automate things, it's better where possible, as long as the automation makes sense and it's automating something that's doing something repetitive. You don't want to automate an imperfect process because you'll get imperfect results. Okay, lots of other resources here. I want to just kind of show at the end of the call. So different places you go. I'm going to click on some of these, the Sage knowledge base, take you out, where you can search on, maybe an error 47 in whatever this, PR time off program. You can search on that and didn't get a result, but that's just the sort of thing, or you can search on processing deposits. And you'll find there's a document in here. One of these has a nice procedural direct deposits. There's something for sales order in here that's a nice one. So that's the idea, is there's a knowledge base and it has different ways to search that you can go refer to. Okay, there's also Sage City. That's more of a user-driven forum. And it's got a, go to Sage Accounting here. And then I think there's a Sage 100 in here somewhere. But there's a way to, you can search and make posts. So announcements, general discussion, let's see, one of these. Yeah, questions about manual journal entry. So anyway, there's ways to search on here, and if you have a question, you can post a question and get an answer from maybe a power user or maybe a consultant. There's all kinds of people on that forum as well. There's YouTube. There's Sage U. Sage University is just sageu.com. And then that's a login based thing, but you can log in and there's different different classes you can take at Sage U. Some of them are free, some of them have a nominal charge, but they're sometimes very worthwhile. And let's get out of there. And okay, so Sage Partner Cloud, what is Sage Partner Cloud? That is basically somebody else's computer. You've got your computer on your server in your office. You don't want to deal with maintaining the server, backing it up, buying a new server, all this and that. And the other thing related to the server, you can basically, Sage has a data center that has Sage 100 instances, and you can transfer your Sage into the cloud. Then you access it via a remote desktop. It's like you're logging into a computer. There's your Sage, there's your data. It's backed up by them every night, I think, 7 times a day, once a week, once a month, once a year, on top of the 7 times a day. So if things were to go horribly wrong, then that can be spun up and restored fairly quickly. I'll close this. I had a customer Thursday night call me, Thursday last week at like 9 o'clock, and they're like, our IT guy calls me, left me a voicemail because I didn't pick up the call. Said, hey, Jim, we got hit by ransomware. And long story short, they had a lot of processes in Sage that got affected. And well, having better backups than they did would have certainly been very helpful. Had they been in the Sage Partner Cloud, I think they'd be back up and running right by now. And right now we're in the middle of trying to reinstall the VDI. It's a mess. So just a little commercial for the Sage Partner Cloud right there. Any other questions here? Otherwise, we're running short on time.
Yeah, that's actually all the questions we received. Just reminder to everyone, if you have any outstanding thoughts or need any other guidance, please feel free to reach out to us directly or use those links within the guide. The last page that Jim was on is actually linked, and so clicking through and getting all the Sage resources is really cool as well. The Sage City is a very active place, I think, between users, and it's obviously free and encouraged to communicate with each other. So I think that resource is really cool and maybe underutilized by a lot of our clients. But the knowledge base has a lot of stuff going on too, and we just want to encourage you to use these avenues to get to other super users or even to our team. Bring up any questions you have when processing this. You can always email us at info@dsdinc.com or your consultant of choice. So any final thoughts or anything, Jim?
Just remember that the system dates are important. Try to set those for the period you plan to be working in that time, and then change them if necessary. Close GL last. GL is the one module you can always reopen if you need to.
Close GL last. I like that. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think it's actually unfortunate that you had a recent client, get attacked by ransomware during this very intense processing time of year, and so that's just awesome. Do you have any other Sage Partner Cloud kind of stories or testimonies to the power of that solution?
So of our consulting team, I'm not really one of the ones focused on the Sage Partner Cloud, so I would probably not be the best person for storytelling. That would be the other Jim Woodhead. Gotcha. So sorry, yeah, I wouldn't really have any good stories like he would. Sorry.
Yeah, I just love that solution. As Jim said, it gives you the ability to access your system through a browser, and so it could be, infinite possibilities of where you access your Sage 100. You could be processing year-end in a cabin in the snowy woods or something,
right? Yeah.
Or on a beach. Yeah.
As long as you have internet, then yeah, you can get Sage to fire up for you using the SPC. Right. So.
Oh, cool. We got one last question. So the question is, could you change the sales order period end date in setup to prevent someone from updating sales order invoicing into the wrong account without period end processing until a later date?
No, and the reason why is because sales order isn't looking at the sales order period date. It's actually looking at, let's see if I can prove this. See that the sales order posting date falls into a prior GL period. So all the modules, sales order, purchase order, AR, AP, they all look at the GL period. So a GL is the one module that controls whether anything can post back to a prior period or not.
Okay, I think that answers that. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jim, for presenting and giving a live look at the way these processes work. I know, and thank you to everyone that asked questions and engaged with us throughout the presentation here today. As mentioned, the guide is available here for download. In the next 24 hours, we will distribute the guide again, as well as a link to the recording that will be chaptered out so that it's hopefully a little easier to follow than just this 90-minute session. So good luck, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help. Have a great day.
Thank you.